Daniel Carter had everything money could buy: a tech empire worth millions, a penthouse overlooking the city, and an engagement to the most coveted woman in high society. But when family pressure forced him to retreat to his countryside estate, he never expected to find his entire world crumbling at the hands of a simple stable worker named Emily. She was everything his fiancée wasn't: warm, honest, and completely untouchable. What started as innocent conversations over morning chores became a dangerous obsession that would force Daniel to choose between the golden cage his family built for him and a love so real it terrified him. But Emily had secrets of her own, scars from a past betrayal that made her see through Daniel's lies before he even knew he was telling them. When she discovered the truth about his engagement, her rejection cut deeper than any business failure ever could. Now, Daniel faces the ultimate test. Can a man who spent his entire life playing it safe find the courage to risk everything for love? If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Daniel Carter stood at his office window on the 32nd floor, watching the city blur into evening shadows. The weight of his father's words still hung in the air like smoke from an old fire. "The Hale family expects an answer by Christmas, son." Richard Carter had spoken with the same steady voice he used for board meetings. "Vanessa is a good match, smart, connected, and she understands our world." Their world. Daniel ran his hand over his face, feeling the exhaustion that came from carrying other people's dreams. At 29, he had built his own tech company from nothing. He owned 3 homes, drove cars worth more than most people's houses, and had enough money to last 5 lifetimes. But standing in this glass tower, surrounded by everything he had worked for, he felt empty. The engagement to Vanessa Hale made sense on paper. Their families had known each other for years. Her father owned half the shipping industry on the East Coast. She was beautiful, educated, and moved through society parties like she was born to them, which she was. But when Daniel closed his eyes, he couldn't picture growing old with her. He couldn't imagine Sunday mornings or quiet talks or the kind of love his grandparents had shared. With Vanessa, everything felt like a business deal dressed up in wedding clothes. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Your father told me about your conversation. I know this feels big, sweetheart. Maybe some time at the estate would help clear your head." The estate. Daniel hadn't been to the family horse farm in Virginia for almost 2 years. It was where he had spent his summers as a boy, learning to ride and muck stalls and understand that hard work built character more than money ever could. His parents had bought it when his business took off, partly as an investment and partly to stay connected to something real. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe he needed to get away from the city's noise and pressure. Maybe he needed to remember who he was before the world told him who he should be. Daniel loosened his tie and made the decision. He would drive down to Virginia in the morning, give himself a week or 2 to think, to breathe, to figure out how to marry a woman he respected but didn't love, or how to disappoint a father who had sacrificed everything for his family's future. Either way, he needed space to find an answer that wouldn't destroy him from the inside out. The drive to Virginia took 4 hours, but Daniel stretched it to 6. He stopped for coffee twice, took the scenic route through small towns, and let his mind wander for the first time in months. When he finally turned down the long gravel road that led to Carter Estate, the sun was setting behind rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The main house sat on a small rise, white columns and wide porches that spoke of old Southern grace. Below it, closer to the road, stood the stables and training facilities. Even from a distance, Daniel could see horses moving in the paddocks, their coats catching the last light of day. Tom Wilkins met him at the main house, keys jingling in his weathered hands. At 60, Tom had managed the estate since Daniel's parents bought it. He was a man of few words, but deep knowledge, the kind of person who could read a horse's mood from across a field. "Good to see you, Daniel." Tom's handshake was firm, his eyes kind but curious. "Your mother called, said you might be staying a while." "A week or 2, maybe longer." Daniel grabbed his bag from the car. "How are things running?" "Smooth as always. Got 12 horses right now. 3 new ones came in last month for training. Emily's been working with them." "Emily?" "Emily Moore. Been here about a year. Best stable hand I've ever worked with. Quiet girl, but horses trust her like she speaks their language. Daniel nodded, though the name meant nothing to him. He'd been too busy building his empire to pay attention to who worked the family land. I'll probably come down to the stables tomorrow. Haven't ridden in too long. Tom smiled. Your old horse Ranger is still here, getting gray around the muzzle, but he remembers you. I'll let Emily know you might be around. She starts early, usually here by 6. After Tom left, Daniel walked through the main house, reacquainting himself with rooms full of family photos and comfortable furniture. His mother had decorated it with warmth instead of style, choosing soft couches and reading lamps over the cold elegance of their city home. He found himself drawn to the wide windows that looked down toward the stables. Lights glowed warm and yellow in the barn, and he could see a figure moving between the stalls. Someone checking on the horses for the night, probably this Emily that Tom had mentioned. Daniel poured himself a glass of water and settled into his father's favorite chair. For the first time in months, he felt his shoulders relax. No meetings tomorrow, no phone calls about mergers or acquisitions, no reminders about engagement announcements or wedding plans. Just him and the quiet Virginia night and time to figure out what came next. He fell asleep in the chair, still wearing his city clothes, dreaming of summer days when life felt simple, and the hardest choice he faced was which horse to ride. Morning came early to the estate. Daniel woke to the sound of horses nickering in the distance and realized he had slept better than he had in weeks. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, showing him a world painted in green and gold. He showered, changed into old jeans and boots he found in the closet, and walked down to the stables. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying scents of hay and leather, and something else he couldn't name but remembered from childhood. The barn was already busy with activity. Horses moved restlessly in their stalls, ready for turnout and exercise. Daniel could hear someone moving around, the soft murmur of a voice talking to the animals. He found her in the third stall, brushing a big bay gelding with slow, careful strokes. She was smaller than he expected, maybe 5'6", with dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were practical, work boots, jeans with honest dirt on them, and a faded blue t-shirt. When she turned at the sound of his footsteps, he saw a face that was pretty in a natural way, with clear skin and eyes the color of summer sky. You must be Daniel. Her voice was soft but clear. I'm Emily. Tom said you might be coming around. Sorry to interrupt. He suddenly felt awkward, like he was intruding on something private. Just wanted to see how things looked. No interruption. She went back to brushing the horse. This is Thunder. He came to us nervous and jumpy, but he's settling in now. Aren't you, boy? The horse leaned into her touch, clearly trusting this small woman completely. Daniel found himself watching the way she moved, efficient but gentle, like she had all the time in the world for each animal. Tom said you've been here a year? About that. Moved down from Pennsylvania after... She paused, seemed to choose her words carefully. After I needed a change. Daniel understood about needing changes. You like it here? I love it. The simple honesty in her voice surprised him. The horses, the land, the work. It's good work, you know. At the end of the day, you can see what you've accomplished. The horses are fed, the stalls are clean, everyone's safe and comfortable. It matters. She finished with Thunder and led him out to the paddock. Daniel followed, drawn by something he couldn't name. Maybe it was the way she moved with complete confidence, or the way the horses responded to her, or just the fact that she seemed utterly content with this simple life. What did you do before? He asked as she latched the gate. Office work. Accounting, mostly. Numbers on a computer all day. She shrugged. Paid well, but I felt like I was disappearing a little more every day, like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Daniel knew that feeling too well. What changed your mind about leaving? Emily was quiet for a moment, watching Thunder graze in the morning sun. Sometimes life makes the choice for you. Sometimes you realize that what looks safe and stable on the outside can be the most dangerous thing of all. Before Daniel could ask what she meant, Tom appeared with a wheelbarrow and a list of morning chores. Emily excused herself to help feed the other horses, and Daniel found himself alone with more questions than answers. But as he watched her work, moving from stall to stall with patient care, he felt something shift inside him. Here was someone who had walked away from security to find something real, someone who chose meaning over money, peace over prestige, someone who might understand the choice he was struggling to make. Daniel spent the morning learning routines he should have known years ago. Emily showed him how each horse liked to be approached, which ones needed extra attention, and how to read the small signs that meant comfort or distress. She was a natural teacher, patient with his city soft hands and rusty skills. Horses don't lie, she told him as they worked together to clean stalls. They can't pretend to like you or trust you. You earn it every day or you don't have it at all. Sounds like horses are smarter than people. Emily glanced at him sideways, a small smile playing at her lips. Maybe they just don't complicate things unnecessarily. They worked in comfortable silence after that, falling into a rhythm that surprised Daniel with its satisfaction. There was something healing about honest physical work, about caring for creatures that asked for nothing more than food, water, and kindness. At lunch, they sat on hay bales outside the barn, sharing sandwiches Emily had packed and watching the horses graze in the afternoon sun. Daniel realized it was the first meal he had eaten in months without checking his phone. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said, unwrapping her sandwich. "Sure." "What do you do? When you're not here, I mean. Tom mentioned you have businesses in the city." Daniel had answered this question 1,000 times at parties and meetings, usually with a practiced speech about innovation and market opportunities. But sitting here in work clothes with dirt under his fingernails, the usual words felt wrong. "I started a tech company about 5 years ago. We help other businesses organize their data and make better decisions." He paused, surprised by how empty it sounded. "It's been successful, financially speaking." "But?" He looked at her, struck by how she had heard the doubt he hadn't even voiced. "But I'm not sure it matters." "Not really. At the end of the day, I've helped some companies make more money, and I've made more money, and everyone's checking boxes on their success lists, but..." He trailed off, not sure how to finish. "But you feel like you're disappearing, too." The understanding in her voice caught him off guard. "Yeah, something like that." Emily finished her sandwich and leaned back against the barn wall. "My sister thinks I'm crazy for leaving my old job, says I threw away a perfectly good career to shovel horse manure. She's probably right from one perspective. But from your perspective?" "From my perspective, I was dying slowly in that office. Now I wake up every morning knowing I'll do something that matters, even if it's small. These horses depend on me. They're better off because I'm here. That's not nothing." Daniel found himself thinking about his own work, trying to remember the last time he had felt essential rather than just profitable. The realization was uncomfortable. "What about you?" Emily asked. "What makes you feel like you matter?" It was a simple question, but Daniel couldn't find a simple answer. In his business, he mattered because of the money he generated and the deals he closed. In his family, he mattered because he was carrying on a legacy of success. In society, he mattered because of where he lived and what he drove and who he was supposed to marry. But underneath all of that, who was he? What did he care about when no one was watching or keeping score? "I don't know," he said finally. "I used to think I did, but I honestly don't know anymore." Emily nodded, like this made perfect sense. "That's why you're here, isn't it? To figure it out." "Maybe." She stood and brushed hay off her jeans. "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. The horses don't care about your business or your money or whatever brought you here. They just care about whether you're kind to them in the moment. It's a good place to start figuring out who you really are." As they walked back into the barn to finish the afternoon chores, Daniel realized Emily was right. For the first time in years, he was in a place where his usual measurements of worth didn't matter, where he could discover what remained when everything else was stripped away. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. The days settled into a rhythm that surprised Daniel with its satisfaction. He woke early, before the sun painted the eastern hills gold. He walked down to the stables where Emily was already working, greeting each horse by name and checking for any problems from the night before. They worked together without much conversation, but the silence felt comfortable rather than empty. Daniel found himself looking forward to these morning hours. There was something pure about starting each day with honest work, about caring for creatures that asked for nothing more than consistency and kindness. His soft city hands grew calloused. His back stopped aching from the unfamiliar labor. His phone stayed forgotten in the main house for hours at a time. Emily taught him things he should have learned as a boy: how to read a horse's mood from the set of its ears, how to approach a nervous animal with patience rather than force, how to find satisfaction in simple tasks done well. "You're getting better at this," she told him one morning as they turned the horses out to pasture. "Storm actually came to you yesterday instead of waiting to be caught." Storm was a temperamental mare who had arrived at the estate skittish and defensive. Emily said she'd been mistreated before, made to fear human hands, but slowly, with patience and consistency, she was learning to trust again. "She reminds me of someone I know," Emily said, watching the mare trot across the field. "Someone who was hurt before. Someone who's learning that not all people will let her down." Daniel wondered if Emily was talking about the horse or herself. He had noticed the way she sometimes went quiet when Tom mentioned her past, or how she changed the subject when he asked about family or friends from Pennsylvania. Whatever had brought her to Virginia hadn't been simple, but he understood about complicated pasts, about starting over, about trying to figure out who you were when the old answers no longer fit. One evening, after they had finished all the chores and the horses were settled for the night, Emily suggested they walk the fence line to check for any breaks or weak spots. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that seemed impossible in a world that also contained concrete and traffic and board meetings. They walked slowly, talking about small things. Emily told him about Thunder's progress, how he was finally learning to trust people again after whatever trauma had made him so fearful. Daniel found himself sharing stories about growing up, about summers spent on his grandfather's small farm in North Carolina, about learning to ride before he could properly tie his shoes. "What changed?" Emily asked. "You seem like you were happy then." Daniel considered the question as they reached the top of a small hill that overlooked the entire state. Below them, the horses grazed peacefully in the evening light. The main house glowed warm and welcoming in the distance. "I guess I got busy becoming successful," he said finally. "My father had big dreams for our family. He worked construction for 20 years, saving every penny, putting himself through business school at night. When my tech company took off, it felt like I was finally giving him everything he had sacrificed for." "But what about what you sacrificed for?" The question hung in the air between them. Daniel realized he had been so focused on meeting other people's expectations that he had never stopped to consider his own dreams. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm not sure I ever asked myself that question." Emily sat down on a fallen log, patting the space beside her. Daniel joined her, aware of how natural it felt to be here with her, talking about things he had never discussed with anyone. "Can I tell you something?" she said, "about why I left Pennsylvania?" Daniel nodded, sensing this was important. "I was engaged, 3 years, to a man who was perfect on paper. Good job, nice family, everyone loved him. We had the venue booked, the invitations ordered, the whole thing planned out." She was quiet for a moment, picking at a piece of bark. "But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I felt like I was drowning. Like I was agreeing to become someone I didn't recognize, someone who cared about the right house in the right neighborhood and the right car and the right friends, someone who never asked hard questions or rocked the boat or wanted anything that didn't fit the plan." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What happened?" "I called it off, 2 months before the wedding. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew I couldn't marry someone just because it made sense to everyone else. I couldn't spend my life pretending to be happy." She looked at him directly then, her blue eyes serious in the fading light. "Everyone thought I was crazy. My family, my friends, his family. They said I was throwing away a good man and a stable future for some romantic fantasy. Maybe they were right, but I'd rather be alone and honest than together and pretending." Daniel felt like she had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart, because he knew exactly what she meant. He was facing the same choice, the same pressure to do what looked right instead of what felt true. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. Emily smiled, the first completely unguarded expression he had seen from her. "Not for a single day. It led me here, didn't it? To work I love, to a life that feels like mine instead of someone else's, to this conversation with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded and the first stars appeared overhead. Daniel felt something shifting inside him, like pieces of a puzzle finally starting to fit together. He was falling in love with Emily Moore. With her honesty, her strength, her willingness to choose truth over convenience, with the way she cared for broken horses and trusted her own heart even when the world told her she was wrong. But he was also engaged to another woman, bound by promises and expectations and family honor to marry someone he didn't love. For the first time since arriving at the estate, Daniel felt the weight of his real problem. It wasn't just about disappointing his father or walking away from a good business opportunity. It was about choosing between the life he was supposed to want and the life that might actually make him happy. As they walked back toward the lights of the stable, Daniel made a decision that scared him more than any business deal ever had. He was going to find a way to tell Emily the truth about Vanessa, about the engagement, about the choice he was facing. Because if he had learned anything from watching her with the horses, it was that real trust could only grow in the soil of complete honesty, even if that honesty might cost him the one thing he was beginning to realize he couldn't bear to lose. The morning air felt different when Daniel woke up, heavier somehow, like the weight of unspoken truth was pressing down on the entire estate. He had spent half the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing words that never sounded right, trying to find a way to tell Emily about Vanessa that wouldn't destroy everything good between them. He dressed slowly, his hands shaking slightly as he pulled on his work boots. Through his window, he could see Emily already moving around the barn, her small figure purposeful in the early light. She trusted him. She had shared her own painful story of calling off an engagement, and he had sat there nodding like he understood, like he wasn't facing the exact same situation from the other side. The walk to the stables felt longer than usual. Daniel's stomach churned with something that felt like seasickness. He had given presentations to rooms full of investors, negotiated million-dollar deals, fired people who had worked for him for years. But he had never felt as nervous as he did walking toward this conversation with a woman who mucked stalls for a living. Emily looked up when he entered the barn, her face brightening with the warm smile that had become the best part of his mornings. "You're late," she said, but there was no criticism in it. "I already started feeding. Thunder was looking for you." "Emily." His voice came out rough. "We need to talk." Something in his tone made her hands still on the feed bucket she was holding. Her blue eyes searched his face, and he saw the exact moment when wariness replaced warmth. "That sounds serious." "It is." She set down the bucket and brushed her hands on her jeans. "Okay, let me finish with the horses first." "Emily, please. This can't wait." Now she looked genuinely concerned. She followed him out of the barn to their usual spot on the hay bales, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed, waiting. Daniel had planned this moment, rehearsed it, but all his careful words disappeared when he looked at her face. "I'm engaged." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Emily didn't move, didn't speak, but something changed in her expression. A door closing, a light going out. "I see." Her voice was very quiet. "Emily, it's not what you think." "What do I think, Daniel?" There was no anger in her voice, which somehow made it worse. "What exactly do I think?" "It's complicated. It's not a real engagement, not really. It's more like a business arrangement between families. I don't love her." Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A business arrangement, right? Listen to me, please. I came here because I couldn't go through with it. I've been trying to find a way out, trying to figure out how to what? How to let the poor stable girl down easy? That's not fair, isn't it?" Emily finally sat down, but she kept distance between them on the hay bale. "You've been here for over a week. We've talked every day. We've shared meals and stories and—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "When were you planning to mention this little detail?" Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. This was going all wrong. "I was going to tell you. I am telling you. That's what I'm doing right now." "After what? After I told you about my engagement? After I shared the most painful thing that ever happened to me?" Her voice was still quiet, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "Did it make you feel better about your own situation? Like you weren't the only one lying to someone they were supposed to marry?" "It's not the same thing." "No, it's not. Emily stood up, brushing hay off her jeans with sharp, angry movements. I was honest with my fiancé. I told him I couldn't marry him to his face, even though it destroyed everything. You're here playing house with me while your real fiancé is somewhere else planning your wedding. There's no wedding planned. Emily, if you would just listen. I am listening. I'm listening to you explain how you've been lying to me for over a week. I'm listening to you tell me that everything we've shared, every conversation, every moment of trust has been built on something false. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Emily, please. What's between us is real, more real than anything I've ever felt. What's between us is me falling for a man who belongs to someone else, again. The word again hit Daniel like a physical blow. What do you mean, again? Emily was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the horses in the pasture. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. My fiancé in Pennsylvania, the one I broke up with, he was seeing someone else for the last 6 months of our engagement. Said it didn't mean anything, that he was just confused, that he would choose me when it came down to it. She finally looked at Daniel, and her eyes were like winter sky. Sound familiar? Emily, I'm not him. This is completely different. Is it? You're engaged to one woman but spending time with another. You're telling me you don't love your fiancé, but you haven't broken up with her. You're making me feel like maybe I matter to you while you keep all your options open. She shook her head. Maybe you're not exactly like him, but the result is the same. I'm the secret again. The temporary distraction. You're not a distraction. I'm what? The woman you're going to leave when reality comes calling? Daniel felt desperate now, like he was watching something precious slip away and couldn't figure out how to hold on to it. Emily, I swear to you I'm going to end things with Vanessa. I came here to figure out how. Vanessa? Emily said the name like she was tasting something bitter. That's her name. Yes, but what's she like? The question caught Daniel off guard. What? Your fiancé. What's she like? Is she beautiful, successful, perfect for you on paper? Daniel hesitated, and Emily nodded like he'd confirmed something she already knew. Let me guess. She's everything a man like you is supposed to want. Rich family, good connections, moves in the right circles. The kind of woman who looks perfect in photos at charity galas. Emily, none of that matters to me. Doesn't it? Then why haven't you broken up with her already? If she's so wrong for you, if I'm so right, what's stopping you? Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck in his throat. Because the truth was complicated. Because disappointing his father felt impossible. Because walking away from the Hale family alliance would have consequences he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Because ending the engagement meant admitting he had been wrong about everything he thought he wanted. Emily read his silence perfectly. That's what I thought. She started walking back toward the barn. I need to finish the morning chores. Emily, wait, let me explain. She turned back to him, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked tired. Older, like something in her had given up. Daniel, I told you about my engagement because I thought you would understand. I thought you were someone who chose honesty over convenience, who picked truth over what looked good to other people. But you're not, are you? You're just like everyone else. You want what's safe and expected, but you also want to feel good about yourself. So you come here and play pretend with the simple country girl while you keep your real life waiting in the wings. That's not true. Then prove it. Go home. End your engagement. Choose what you actually want instead of what you think you're supposed to want. Her voice got quieter. And leave me out of it. I won't be your escape fantasy while you figure out whether you have the courage to live honestly. She walked into the barn, leaving Daniel standing alone in the morning sun. He wanted to follow her, to keep explaining, to make her understand that his feelings for her were the most honest thing in his life. But deep down, he knew she was right. He had been treating her like a safe place to hide while he avoided making the hard choice. He had let her believe they were building something real while he kept one foot planted firmly in his old life. Daniel walked back to the main house with lead in his stomach. His phone was buzzing with missed calls and text messages, 3 from his father, 2 from his assistant, 1 from Vanessa herself. He ignored them all and sat in his father's chair, staring out at the stables where Emily was working alone. taking care of the horses that depended on her, living the honest life she had chosen even when it cost her everything. For the first time since he had arrived at the estate, Daniel felt truly lost. Because Emily was right about everything, and he didn't know if he had the strength to do what she was asking, but he knew he couldn't keep living in this space between truth and lies, between the life he was supposed to want and the life that might actually make him happy. Something had to change. Someone had to choose. The question was whether Daniel Carter had the courage to be that someone. The next 3 days passed like a slow torture. Daniel stayed away from the stables, telling himself he was giving Emily space, but really he was avoiding the disappointment he knew he would see in her eyes. He spent his mornings walking the property alone, his afternoons in forced phone calls with his assistant, his evenings staring at his father's number in his contacts without pressing call. Emily was professional when their paths crossed. She nodded politely when Tom introduced her to some visitors interested in boarding their horses. She answered Daniel's questions about Storm's training with the same courteous distance she might show any stranger. But the warmth was gone. The easy conversations, the shared laughter, the comfortable silences, all of it had vanished like morning mist. Daniel felt the loss like a physical ache. On Thursday afternoon, his parents arrived unannounced. Daniel heard the car doors slamming and looked out to see his father striding toward the main house with the determined walk that meant business. His mother followed more slowly, her face concerned but gentle. "Son," Richard Carter's handshake was firm, his eyes searching. "You haven't been returning my calls. I've been thinking, like you suggested, about the engagement, among other things." Margaret Carter stepped forward and hugged her son, her arms warm and familiar. "You look thin, sweetheart. Are you eating?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't look fine." She studied his face with the careful attention that only mothers possessed. "You look troubled." They settled in the living room, his parents on the familiar couch, Daniel in the chair he had been claiming for 2 weeks. Through the windows he could see Emily in the distance working with Thunder in the training ring. Even from here, he could tell the horse was responding well to her quiet patience. "Daniel." His father leaned forward, hands clasped. "The Hale family is getting impatient. Vanessa called me yesterday asking when you plan to return to the city. They want to announce the engagement officially, set a date." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "I'm not ready." "Ready for what?" "You've known this was coming for months." "It's a good match, son. Vanessa is beautiful, intelligent, well-connected. Her father's shipping contracts alone would what, Dad? Make us richer. We're already rich." Richard sat back, surprise flickering across his face. "This isn't just about money, Daniel. It's about building something lasting, something bigger than just one generation." "What if I don't want something bigger? What if I want something real instead?" His mother reached across the space between them and touched his hand. "Sweetheart, what's this really about? You've seemed different since you've been here. Distant. Like you're carrying some heavy burden." Daniel looked at his parents, his father with his practical dreams and his mother with her gentle wisdom, and felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him like stones. They had given him everything, sacrificed for his education, celebrated his successes, supported every decision he had ever made. How could he tell them he wanted to throw it all away for a woman who wouldn't even speak to him? "I met someone," he said quietly. The words fell into the room like breaking glass. His parents exchanged a look that spoke of years of marriage and shared understanding. "I see." His father's voice was careful, controlled. "Someone here?" "Yes." "Daniel," his mother said gently, "you're engaged to a wonderful woman who loves you." "Vanessa doesn't love me, Mom. She likes the idea of me, the business connections, the social position, the life we'd build together. But she doesn't know me, not really." "Love grows, son," his father said. "Your mother and I didn't marry for passion. We married because we were compatible, because we wanted the same things, because we could build a good life together. The love came later." Daniel looked at his parents, seeing the genuine affection between them, the comfortable partnership they had built over 30 years. It was real and good and valuable, but it wasn't what he wanted. "What if I want the love to come first?" His mother smiled sadly. Oh, sweetheart, is that what this is about? Some romantic fantasy? It's not a fantasy. She's real, and what I feel for her is real. And for the first time in my life, I know what it means to want to be a better person for someone else. What's her name? His father asked, and Daniel could hear him already calculating, already trying to figure out how to manage this complication. Emily Moore. She works in the stables. The silence that followed felt endless. Daniel watched his parents process this information, saw his father's jaw tighten and his mother's eyes fill with something that looked like disappointment. A stable hand, his father said finally. Yes. Daniel, you can't be serious. What kind of life would that be? What kind of future? A honest one. Honest? His father stood up, pacing to the window. Son, you have responsibilities. To your family, to your business, to the agreements we've made. You can't just throw all of that away for some girl you've known for 2 weeks. I've known Vanessa for 2 years and I still don't love her. Love isn't everything, Daniel. His father turned back to face him. Compatibility matters. Shared values matter. Building something together matters. Emily and I share values. We both believe in honest work, in taking care of things that depend on us, in choosing truth over convenience. His mother looked up sharply at that last phrase. What do you mean, truth over convenience? Daniel realized he had said too much, but it was too late to take it back. Emily was engaged before. She called it off because she realized she didn't love him. Even though it was hard, even though everyone told her she was making a mistake. And you admire that, his mother said quietly. I admire her courage. His father laughed, but there was no humor in it. Courage? Or selfishness? She destroyed her relationship, probably hurt her fiancé deeply because she decided her feelings were more important than her commitments. She was honest about who she was and what she wanted. And what about what you want, Daniel? His mother asked. Really want, not just what feels exciting right now. Daniel looked out the window again. Emily had finished working with Thunder and was leading him back to the barn. Even from a distance, he could see the care in the way she moved, the attention she paid to the horse's needs. I want to wake up next to someone who knows me. Not the version of me that looks good at parties, but the real me. The one who'd rather muck stalls than sit in board meetings. I want to build something that matters, not just something that makes money. I want to choose love over logic, even if it's harder. His parents were quiet for a long moment. Finally, his mother spoke. Have you told her how you feel? Daniel's stomach clenched. She won't talk to me. Why not? Because I didn't tell her about Vanessa right away. She thinks I was using her, keeping her as some kind of backup plan while I figured out my real life. His father made a sound that might have been satisfaction. Smart woman. Dad? She's right, son. You've been having your cake and eating it too, playing house with this girl while staying engaged to Vanessa. That's not choosing truth over convenience. That's having both and hoping you won't have to decide. The words hit Daniel like a slap, because his father was right. Emily was right. He had been living in a fantasy, enjoying the best parts of both worlds while avoiding the hard choices that real life demanded. His mother stood up and moved to sit on the arm of his chair. Sweetheart, I can see that you care about this woman, but caring isn't enough. If you really want to be with her, you have to be willing to give up everything else first. Not because she asks you to, but because it's the right thing to do. And if I do that? If I end things with Vanessa? His father's voice was heavy. Then you'll have to live with the consequences. The Hale family will be hurt and angry. There will be social repercussions, business implications. People will talk. And if I marry Vanessa instead, then you'll have the life you were raised for. Successful, comfortable, respected, but perhaps not happy. His mother squeezed his shoulder. Only you can decide what you can live with, Daniel. But whatever you choose it completely. Don't leave anyone hanging in uncertainty while you make up your mind. That evening, after his parents had returned to the city with promises to support whatever decision he made, Daniel sat alone in the gathering dark. The stables were quiet. The horses settled for the night. He could see a light still on in the small apartment above the barn where Emily lived. He knew what he had to do, had known since Emily walked away from him 3 days ago. The only question was whether he had the courage to do it. Daniel pulled out his phone, and scrolled to Vanessa's number. His finger hovered over the call button for a long moment before he pressed it. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Daniel, finally. I was beginning to worry." "Vanessa, we need to talk." "Of course. When are you coming home?" "Daddy wants to discuss the announcement details, and I have some ideas about venues." "Vanessa, stop, please." Something in his tone must have reached her because she went quiet. "I can't marry you," he said. The silence stretched long enough that he wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was different, smaller. "I see. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, and I know the timing is terrible, but I can't keep pretending this is what I want." "Is there someone else?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes. I thought there might be. You've been distant for months, even before you left for Virginia." Her voice was calm, almost businesslike. "Do I know her?" "No." "Will you tell me about her?" The question surprised him. "Vanessa, please. I think I deserve that much." Daniel thought about Emily, about her honesty and strength and the way she cared for broken things until they learned to trust again. "She's nothing like what you'd expect. She's not rich or connected or anything that would make sense to our families. She works with horses. She chooses what's right over what's easy. She sees who I really am, not just who I'm supposed to be." Vanessa was quiet for another long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. "You know, Daniel, I don't think I ever really knew who you were either. I knew the successful businessman, the suitable husband, the man who looked perfect next to me at parties. But the person you're describing, someone who cares more about being real than being impressive, I'm not sure I ever met him." "I'm sorry, Vanessa. You deserve better than someone who's pretending to love you." "Yes," she said simply. "I do." After the call ended, Daniel sat in the dark for a long time. He felt hollowed out, like he had just torn apart the careful structure of his entire life. But underneath the fear and uncertainty, he felt something else: relief. Tomorrow he would have to face the consequences: his father's disappointment, the social awkwardness, the business complications. But tonight, for the first time in months, he was free to tell the truth. The question was whether Emily would still want to hear it. 14-20. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his father's chair, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to pale gold, rehearsing words he wasn't sure Emily would listen to. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face when he had told her about Vanessa, the way something had died in her expression, like a candle being blown out. At 6 in the morning, he walked down to the stables. Emily was already there, of course, moving through the morning routine with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. She looked up when his shadow fell across the barn entrance, and for just a moment he thought he saw something soften in her face. But then the professional mask slipped back into place. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." Mr. Carter, not Daniel, not the easy familiarity they had shared just days ago. "Emily, please, we need to talk." "I'm working." She continued measuring grain into feed buckets, her movements precise and purposeful. "I ended it. With Vanessa, last night." Emily's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their task. "I see. That's all you have to say?" She finally looked at him directly, and he saw walls in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "What do you want me to say? Congratulations." "I want you to say you'll give us another chance." Emily set down the feed bucket and faced him fully. "Daniel, do you know why I really left Pennsylvania?" The question caught him off guard. "You said your fiancé was seeing someone else." "That's part of it, but not all of it." She leaned against a stall door, her arms crossed. "He was having an affair, yes? With his secretary, if you can believe the cliché. But when I found out, do you know what he said?" Daniel shook his head. "He said he was sorry, that it didn't mean anything, that he would end it. He said he chose me. He said the other woman was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, and now he was ready to do the right thing." Emily's voice was flat, emotionless. "Sound familiar?" "Emily, it's not the same thing. I didn't cheat on Vanessa. I was never unfaithful." "No? Then what do you call spending 2 weeks getting close to me while you were engaged to someone else?" What do you call sharing meals and conversations and feelings with me while another woman was planning your wedding? Daniel felt heat rise in his face. I call it falling in love with you. You call it convenient. Emily pushed off from the stall door and started walking toward the feed room. You came here confused and unhappy, and I was available. I listened to you. I cared about you. I made you feel better about yourself. But I was never really a choice, Daniel. I was just what was easy when your real life felt too hard. That's not true. Emily stopped walking and turned back to him. Then why did it take you a week and a half to tell me you were engaged? Why did you let me tell you about my broken engagement without mentioning yours? Why did you only end things with Vanessa after I refused to see you anymore? Each question hit like a physical blow, because Daniel couldn't answer them in a way that made him look good. The truth was ugly and selfish, and exactly what Emily was saying it was. You're right, he said quietly. I handled everything wrong. I was a coward, and I hurt you, and I probably don't deserve another chance. But Emily, what I feel for you is real, more real than anything I've ever felt. I believe you. Her voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. I believe your feelings are real, but real feelings aren't enough, Daniel. They're just the beginning. Then what else? What do I have to do to prove this matters to me? Emily studied his face for a long moment. You have to prove it to yourself first. You have to figure out who you are when you're not trying to please your father or impress society or live up to some image of success. You have to know what you actually want, not just what you think you should want or what feels good in the moment. I know what I want. I want you. No. Emily shook her head sadly. You want the idea of me, the simple country girl who makes you feel grounded and real and different from who you used to be. But you don't actually know me, Daniel. We've known each other for 2 weeks. I know enough. Do you? Do you know that I wake up every night at 3 a.m. because I have anxiety attacks sometimes? Do you know that I barely finished college because I was too busy working 3 jobs to pay for it? Do you know that my father left when I was 12 and I have trust issues with men who make promises they don't keep? Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Emily. Do you know that I'm terrified of ending up like my mother, who spent her whole life waiting for a man to choose her over something else? Do you know that's why I left Pennsylvania, not just because of the affair, but because I realized I was becoming someone who begged for scraps of attention instead of demanding real love? She was crying now, tears she didn't bother to wipe away. Do you know that when you told me you were engaged, it felt like happening all over again? Like I had somehow convinced myself I mattered to someone who was never really available? Like I was the foolish girl who fell for the fantasy instead of seeing the truth? Daniel reached for her, but she stepped back. Emily, I'm sorry. I never wanted to make you feel that way. I know you didn't, but you did. And now you've ended your engagement, and you're here, telling me we can be together, but I don't trust it. I don't trust that you won't change your mind when real life gets complicated. I don't trust that you won't decide I'm not worth whatever problems this choice creates for you. I won't change my mind. You don't know that. 3 days ago you were engaged to someone else. A month ago you probably had never thought seriously about leaving that life. How do I know that 6 months from now, when your father is still disappointed and society is still gossiping and you realize what you gave up, you won't decide you made a mistake? Daniel felt desperate, like he was drowning and couldn't find anything solid to hold on to. Because I love you. Love isn't enough, Daniel. My mother loved my father, but he still left when something better came along. My ex-fiancé claimed to love me, but he still couldn't resist his secretary. Love is just a feeling. It changes, it fades, it gets tested by real life. What matters is choice. And commitment, and proving over time that your words match your actions. She wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, composing herself with visible effort. I need you to leave, Daniel. Go back to your real life and figure out who you are without me here as some kind of safety net. Figure out what you actually want when it's not easy or romantic or an escape from your problems. Emily, please, if you really care about me, if you really want what's best for me, Then you'll understand why I can't do this. I won't be the woman you run to when life gets hard. I won't be your experiment in living authentically. I deserve better than that." She turned and walked into the feed room, leaving Daniel standing alone in the barn. He wanted to follow her, to keep arguing, to somehow convince her that she was wrong about him. But deep down, he knew she wasn't wrong. Not entirely. He had used her as an escape. He had enjoyed the fantasy of this simple life without thinking seriously about the reality of choosing it. He had let her care about him while keeping his options open, just like she said. The worst part was that she was right about his feelings too. He did love the idea of her, the way she made him feel about himself, the life he imagined they could have together. But did he actually know her? Had he ever asked about her dreams beyond the horses, her fears beyond her past relationship, her plans for the future? Or had he been so caught up in his own crisis that he had seen her as a solution rather than a whole person with her own complex needs and desires? Daniel walked back to the main house with lead in his chest. He had thought ending the engagement would be the hard part. He had thought that once he chose Emily, everything else would fall into place. But Emily was asking for something much more difficult than a dramatic gesture. She was asking him to become the kind of man who deserved her trust, someone who made choices based on deep conviction rather than momentary feelings. Someone who understood that love was about more than just wanting someone. It was about being worthy of them. As he packed his things, Daniel realized he had a lot of work to do, not just on himself, but on understanding what it really meant to love someone enough to put their needs ahead of your own desires. Even if that meant walking away to become the man she deserved, instead of trying to convince her to accept the man he was right now. The drive back to the city felt like traveling between two different worlds. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly, his assistant with meeting requests, his father with damage control strategies, friends who had heard about the broken engagement through the social grapevine. He ignored them all, focusing on the road and trying to process everything that had happened. Emily's words echoed in his mind. You have to figure out who you are when you're not trying to please your father or impress society or live up to some image of success. For the past 10 years, Daniel's life had been defined by external measures: stock prices, profit margins, social status, family approval. He had built an identity around being successful, being the son who exceeded expectations, being the man who looked perfect on paper. But who was he underneath all that? What did he care about when no one was watching or keeping score? His city apartment felt like a museum when he walked in. Everything was expensive and perfectly arranged, but none of it felt personal. He couldn't remember the last time he had cooked a meal here, or read a book in the leather chair by the window, or felt truly comfortable in any of these rooms. Daniel stood in his living room, looking out at the city lights, and tried to imagine Emily here. She would hate it, he realized. All the cold surfaces and designer furniture and artificial perfection. She would probably ask why he needed so much space for one person, why everything looked like it belonged in a magazine instead of a home. The thought should have made him defensive, but instead it made him curious. When was the last time his home had felt warm? When was the last time he had chosen something because he liked it rather than because it impressed other people? Over the next few days, Daniel tried to fall back into his old routines. He went to meetings, reviewed quarterly reports, had lunch with investors. But everything felt hollow, like he was playing a role in someone else's life. His assistant noticed he was distracted. His business partner asked if he was feeling well. His mother called daily to check on him. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she asked on Thursday evening. "I'm fine, Mom." "No, you're not. You sound lost." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe I am. Emily was right about something. I don't know who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone expects." "What do you think you need to find out?" It was such a simple question, but Daniel didn't have a simple answer. "I need to figure out what I actually want to do with my life, not what looks impressive or makes money, but what feels meaningful." "And how will you do that?" Daniel looked around his expensive apartment, at the life he had built that suddenly felt like a beautiful prison. "I think I need to start over. Try some things I've never tried. Figure out what makes me feel like myself." His mother was quiet for a moment. "That sounds scary." "Yeah, it does. But also brave." Emily called it necessary. Smart woman. That weekend, Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He volunteered at a local animal shelter, mucking kennels and walking dogs and remembering what it felt like to do work that mattered more than profit margins. The next week, he signed up for a woodworking class, discovering that he loved the feel of creating something useful with his hands. He started cooking his own meals, reading books that had nothing to do with business, taking long walks through the city without his phone. Small changes, but they added up to something that felt like the beginning of authenticity. Daniel also started seeing a therapist, something his old self would have considered a sign of weakness, but Emily's words about becoming worthy of someone's trust had stayed with him. If he wanted to understand his own patterns, his fears, his tendency to choose the safe option even when it made him miserable, he needed help. "Tell me about this woman," Dr. Martinez said during their third session. "Emily. She's real, honest. She makes choices based on what's right instead of what's easy." "And that's different from how you usually make choices?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah. I think I've spent my whole life trying to be the person everyone wanted me to be. My father wanted me to be successful, so I built a business. Society wanted me to marry well, so I got engaged to the right kind of woman. I wanted everyone to be proud of me, so I did what looked impressive. What about what you wanted? I'm not sure I ever asked myself that question, not seriously. What happens when you ask it now?" Daniel closed his eyes and tried to imagine a life built around his own desires instead of other people's expectations. "I want work that feels meaningful. I want relationships based on who I really am, not who I pretend to be. I want to wake up every morning knowing I'm living honestly." "That sounds like Emily had a big impact on you." "She showed me what it looked like to choose truth over convenience, even when it cost everything. She walked away from security to find authenticity. She called off an engagement because she knew it was wrong, even though everyone told her she was crazy. And you admire that courage. I want to have that courage." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "What would courage look like in your life right now?" Daniel thought about Emily's words, about proving things to himself before he could prove them to anyone else. "I think it would look like rebuilding my life around what actually matters to me, even if that means disappointing people, even if it means starting over." "That's a big undertaking." "Yeah, but Emily was right about something else. Real love isn't just about feelings. It's about becoming someone worthy of trust. And I can't be that person if I don't know who I am underneath all the expectations." As the weeks passed, Daniel began making bigger changes. He restructured his business, bringing in a managing partner so he could step back from day-to-day operations. He started a nonprofit focused on providing technology training to underserved communities. He moved out of his expensive apartment into something smaller and warmer. Each change felt like taking off a piece of armor he hadn't realized he was wearing. But through it all, he thought about Emily. Wondered how she was doing, whether she was happy, if she ever thought about their brief time together. He wrote her letters he never sent, picked up his phone to call her dozens of times without following through. Because Emily had been clear about what she needed. Space to see if his choices were real, time to know if his transformation was lasting, proof that he could be the man she deserved rather than just the man who wanted her. So Daniel did the hardest thing he had ever done. He stayed away. He focused on his own growth instead of trying to win her back. He learned to find satisfaction in becoming a better person, not because it might earn him love, but because it was the right thing to do. 6 months after leaving the estate, Daniel finally felt like he was living a life he had chosen rather than inherited. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it was honest. And maybe someday it would be enough to deserve a second chance with the woman who had taught him what authentic love looked like. But first, he had to prove it to himself.